After the Fellowship passes through Moria and arrives in Lothlorien, they come before Celeborn and Lady Galadriel, delivering the news that Gandalf has fallen into the shadow at the hands of the Balrog. Every elf in attendance disheartedly decries the evil tidings. Gandalf was our guide, and he led us through Moria, Frodo announces in honor of the Great Wizard. When our escape seemed beyond hope, he saved us, and he fell. Aragorn proceeds to offer a summary of the Fellowship's journey up to Lothlorien, and then Lady Galadriel reveals that the purpose of the Fellowship's quest is no secret. She and the king are aware of the ring, and their trip, though Gandalf has fallen, may not yet be in vain. For Celeborn, Lord of the Galadriel, says Galadriel, is the wisest of elves and giver of gifts beyond the power of kings. Then she drops one of the most stirring and insightful lines in the entire trilogy. Quote, Celeborn has dwelt in the west since the days of dawn, and I have dwelt with him years uncounted, for ere the fall of Nathgorond of Gondolin I passed over the mountains, and together through the ages of the world we have fought the long defeat. But even now, there is hope left. End quote. With the words long defeat, Galadriel is referencing the slow fading of elves and men. Tolkien's universe follows the pattern of the Anglo-Saxon and pagan idea of Ragnarok, that the arc of time bends toward inevitable ruin and destruction. It is also the classical idea of Hesiod that the lineage of mankind deteriorated as they fell further from their divine origins, progressing through the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Age of Heroes, and the Iron Age. This philosophical outlook and lens is, of course, in stark contrast to the purely evolutionist interpretation of history that says time is a steady upward march of improvement and moral progression toward utopia. The problem with that view, which many today now seem to hold, is not only that it stands in conflict with the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the natural state of everything is entropy, that in the absence of distinct and direct effort to preserve, things tend toward decay, but it also is at odds with the experience of humanity, which saw some of history's worst atrocities in Nazi Germany, Communist China, and the Soviet Russia of the 20th century. This is part of the myth of moral progress that Tolkien gestured at with this idea that history is a long defeat. When this is where the story ends, this is how you end up with the Norse stories of Ragnarok or the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who, as Ovid tells us in his Metamorphosis, dost either push or chase the rock that must always be rolling down the hill again for all eternity. For writers like Albert Camus, this is where the story of humanity begins and ends. Without hope for anything other than the eternal struggle, we humans are destined to progress through life with the same futility as Sisyphus with his rock on the hill. The best we can do is, quote, imagine Sisyphus happy, end quote. But for Tolkien, this is not where the story ends, where we see in story and reality some glimpses at the possibility of a final victory. Quote, actually, I am a Christian, and indeed a Roman Catholic, so that I do not expect history to be anything but a long defeat, though it contains, and in a legend may contain more clearly and movingly, some samples or glimpses of final victory. Tolkien. Tolkien's story of Middle-earth takes the ancient notion of inevitable decline and weaves into it a golden thread that is fundamentally Christian, eucatastrophe. As a concept created, or at least coined, by Tolkien, he describes it this way in a letter to his son Christopher, quote, a sudden happy turn in a story which pierces you with a joy that brings tears, which I argued it is the highest function of fairy stories to produce, and I was there led to the view that it produces its peculiar effect because it is a sudden glimpse of truth. Your whole nature chained in material cause and effect, the chain of death, feels a sudden relief as if a major limb out of a joint had suddenly snapped back. It perceives, if the story has literal truth on a second plane, that this is indeed how things really do work in the great world, for which our nature is made, end quote. We see examples of this throughout the Lord of the Rings, mirroring the pattern of ultimate victory of evil in the Book of Revelation. It is a sealed door taking up the broken sword of his fallen father when all seems lost, and slicing the ring from Sauron's finger. The arrival of the eagles when there is no escape, the coming of reinforcements when the hour of doom is at hand, the falling of Gollum into Mount Doom just as it seems Frodo is about to fail. These moments of eucatastrophe are made possible by the character's insistence to keep fighting even when all seems helpless, which we find on every page of parchment and in every line of ink throughout the trilogy. The rally of dwarves, elves, and men sacrificing themselves in battle under a common banner. Aragorn declaring that if men must die, that he will die as one of them. Frodo sparing Gollum despite the ongoing threat to his personal safety. Boromir and Faramir offering themselves as sacrificial decoys in war. Time after time, the Fellowship and those clearing the way fight despite hope without guarantees. Quote, "Even if we believe that the lights go out when our hearts stop, it is hard not to be attracted to this strange morality that leaves Boromir fighting off hordes of orcs in order to protect the two lowly hobbits, without success as it turns out, or King Theoden leading a seemingly hopeless charge into a final glorious battle. Tolkien has made his stand against the utilitarian spirit of the age, not through self-righteous diatribes, but through story after grand story of characters living in testimony to inherent goodness. Characters consistently making potentially catastrophic decisions simply because they believe it is the right thing to do, even if disastrous in the world of time." End quote. Andrew Barber. We are moved by this morality because it touches a deep reality in our hearts. It sings of heaven and vibrates the strings that connect us with eternity. It produces its peculiar effect because it is a sudden glimpse of truth. In speaking to us, these offer reminders of our duty to resist decline and stand firm in our convictions of the true, good, and beautiful, on the hope that dawn will come again. This is why it is the highest honor of our lives to fight the long defeat throughout the ages of the world. Because our world, like Middle-earth, is always on the edge of decay and needs those willing to deal love and hope through sacrifice. Fighting the long defeat will not protect us from hurt and will often involve temptation toward resignation. But we must not give in. We must constantly and continuously lead into the full and unapologetic engagement in life defensible before a judge standing outside of time. To fight the long defeat is to risk reputation, to speak the truth, be willing to lose wealth for what's right, and keep a dogged pursuit of the beauty, regardless of recognition. It is a love for all worthy things that stand in peril, undeterred by success, timetables, or ambitions, preserving them for the unborn millions. That is our task.